Let me introduce my next guest. The Gray Zone is an independent news website dedicated to original investigative journalism and analysis on politics and empire. It was founded by journalist and author Max Blumenthal, and he joins me now live in the studio. Thank you so much for being with us on the program. I want to jump right into it because there's a lot to talk about in very little time. So when it comes to the U.S. and its red lines and how it deals with its ally Israel, we have seen Israel time and time again prove to the international community that it doesn't respect those red lines. We've seen this happen in Gaza with the invasion of Rafah, for example. Lebanon is another great example of that. And there seems now to be this back and forth between Israel and the U.S. In terms of how its retaliatory attacks on Iran would look like, whether or not Israel would target oil and nuclear facilities, given that there is the upcoming U.S. elections. Will Netanyahu work more efficiently with the Biden administration, do you think?
I think Netanyahu uses the cover of the Biden administration more effectively, and a Donald Trump administration will expose Netanyahu before the American public more as an extremist. And so paradoxically, while Netanyahu is interfering in U.S. elections almost openly to elect Donald Trump, and he's being followed everywhere by one of his top donors, Miriam Adelson, who has pledged $100 million to Trump through a super PAC, and whose late husband, Sheldon Adelson, the casino baron, helped also finance the career of Benjamin Netanyahu and propagandize for him through the largest newspaper in Israel, Israel Hayom. It might actually benefit Benjamin Netanyahu better to be manipulating and running circles around a Kamala Harris administration, because consider the fact that in 2020, the Democrats in Congress issued a resolution to call for Donald Trump to go to Congress before striking Iran, obviously on behalf of Israel. We hear no such call right now because the Biden administration may want to back up an Israeli attack, even as Netanyahu interferes in the election.
Right. I mean, it's a very fluid situation, obviously, that we've been witnessing over the last year now. We recently heard from Tehran saying that they're warning the Gulf Arab states to not allow Israel or the United States, for that matter, to use their military airspace for that retaliatory attack. How seriously should these states take that threat from Iran?
Look, we saw the United States for years and years and years get drunk on its unipolar hegemony over the world since the 1990s, and expect Russia, Iran, and China, all the official enemies, to be the adult in the room as they were sanctioned, their economies were ruined, and they were encircled by NATO bases and U.S. battle carrier groups. And that all changed in February 2020 when Russia invaded Ukraine and reality came crashing through. Israel expected that the Palestinians would eventually lay down, that Hamas would be content to get some work permits for its people, and October 7th happened, and it showed them that Israel couldn't keep just mowing the lawn every few years. And we're going to see that same dynamic change with Iran the moment Israel wages some kind of terror attack or attacks infrastructure in Iran. And it's not just Israel that will be in the crosshairs. It's the Gulf states, which had pledged normalization with Israel as part of the so-called Israeli Middle East corridor that Netanyahu was advertising at the UN. They could be targeted. Their oil facilities, they're well within range of Iranian ballistic missiles. And once again, reality will crash through.
Right. I mean, there would be global repercussions on
the economy would collapse.
Right. I mean, I mentioned red lines, Max. One of them was not invading Lebanon, obviously. Yeah. When we look at how Israel is expanding their attacks across the country while continuing the atrocities in Gaza, while attacking Syria and planning this attack on Iran, what do you think Netanyahu's endgame is here? What does Israel hope to get out of all of this?
Well, one thing I took away from my project of insinuating myself into the heart of Jewish-Israeli society for months and months and months at a time over the course of 5 years as I wrote this book, Goliath, was that there was a fascist current coursing through this society, and that its objective may not have actually been strategic towards the Palestinians or Iran, and that it sought war for its own sake. I've never seen a more militarized, hyper-indoctrinated society than the one that Israel has constructed through full conscription and under the control of its messianic leadership. And now Israel appears to be in a kind of endless and existential war in which it is no longer putting out the pretense of being a liberal democracy. It is constructing a kind of fascistic state of Judea from within, while it is actually seeking right now to ethnically cleanse northern Gaza and planning to move settlers there. It may actually see southern Lebanon as part of its greater Israel, and this is not a strategy. It is actually a kind of apocalyptic, eschatological endgame that will not end well for anyone, especially Israel. And I think we're starting to see the collapse of the Israeli political system as a liberal democracy through this endless war, or what Netanyahu calls life on the sword.
So you think that it's essentially an expansionist project that's being conducted by Netanyahu and his far-right government. Will they be able to reach that goal?
We're seeing the logic of Zionism implode, and it's unclear what the goal is, but we can see that it's a fundamentally destabilizing force that is expansionist and anachronistic in that it is colonial at a time when the rest of the world has moved on beyond it, especially the younger generations in the West. And so Israel will face massive, increasing, intensifying pressure for the rest of its history as long as it insists on continuing along the logical and fundamentally destabilizing lines of Zionism. Now, that sounds very abstract, but in reality, the Israeli public is unable to withstand the kind of punishment that they're imposing on Palestinians or the Lebanese population. And we are going to see in the coming days, weeks, and even years, the death toll and the economic toll rise in Israel, and more of their intelligentsia and middle class will want to leave. And what will they be left with? They'll be left with the fanatical settlers, the Ben Gvirs, the Smotriks, and how will they promote that project to the rest of the world? They won't be able to.
Very interesting. Max, unfortunately, that's all the time I have, but thank you so much for being with me here on the program. It was an absolute pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you for having me here.